Joining us now on leading off our first guest, attended Emerson College in Boston, where he lettered in baseball for 4 seasons. He wrote the critically acclaimed Glenn Burke autobiography, Out at Home, The Glenn Burke Story, in 1995, which chronicled the life of the first Major League Baseball player to reveal his homosexuality. His latest project, Steve Blass, A Pirate for Life, an autobiography, will be released in the next couple of days, and it'll be available at Amazon.com, Pirate Clubhouse stores, and other outlets in your area. This book tells the tale of the former Pirate pitcher whose inexplicable control problems at the peak of his all-star Major League career made Steve Blass disease a part of the American lexicon. I met our next guest during spring training, and Erik Sherman joins us. Erik, on a, the weather-wise, we're not the same as it was in Florida, but tell our listeners about the whole experience of going to spring training for these people who say, do I really want to go to spring training? It's great, isn't it?
Oh, spring training is the greatest, and I think in the history of baseball, it's never been more popular. I mean, they've been selling out parks in spring training stadiums now for the last 6 or 7 years. I mean, it's really become one of the top destinations for spring breaks and the snowbirds. You know, that want to get out of the Northeast. People like me, so. I kind of go down there. Of course, I'm looking for stories, but if I don't get what I'm looking for one day, well, I'm in Florida and I'm not back up in New York, so it's all good.
We're joined by author Erik Sherman here on Leading Off. We're going to talk about his latest venture, which deals with Steve Blass. And first of all, why do you write about baseball?
Well, I love the game of baseball, and I played through college at Emerson College, and in fact I still play baseball. I play in a men's senior league, but I wasn't good enough to make the major leagues, and so evidently though I was good enough to write about Major League Baseball players, and so I've always been a good writer, and that's what I went to college for, and so I'm putting two loves together and writing about and writing with Major League Baseball players. It's really a match made in heaven.
Erik Sherman joining us. His latest project, Steve Blass, A Pirate for Life. This book will be available through Amazon.com, Pirate Clubhouse stores, and other outlets throughout the area. Well, let's first of all talk about the whole Steve Blass situation. Why a book about Steve Blass? I mean, there are thousands of former Major League Baseball players. A lot of books have come out. And why Steve Blass?
Well, what I've tried to do, like with the Glenn Burke story and now with the Steve Blass story, I like writing about baseball stories that transcend the sport. So obviously with Steve Blass, I mean, you've got a situation where this guy went from the highest peak in Major League Baseball to being on the mound after a second complete game victory in the 71 series, following that up with probably his best season in 72, to completely falling from grace and losing his ability to throw strikes, and not just strikes, but in some cases to throw the ball anywhere near the plate. And then there was his struggle afterwards and trying to come back. So, I mean, this is truly a story that transcends like your typical feel-good baseball story. So that is what really attracted me to this particular topic.
Well, let's talk about how did the idea originate to write a book about Steve Blass, and how difficult was it to convince him to be able to do this project?
Well, like with many things in journalism, the genesis of it really occurred in a bar over drinks. I was at the Grand Hyatt having a cocktail with my old college buddy and baseball teammate Tim Neverett, who is for the last 4 seasons has been the play-by-play announcer for the Pirates, and we were joined by Greg Brown, who has been a Pirates play-by-play guy for about 20 years now, and is one of Steve Blass's best friends. And Greg was enamored with the fact that I wrote the Glenn Burke story, and at the time, Comcast was making a documentary, loose basically on the book that I wrote, and Greg was really impressed with that, and he asked me, well, what are you working on right now? And I'm like, well, I'm really between projects. I'm very involved with the documentary, in advising them, and so he says, well, have you considered doing a book on Steve Blass? And I'm like, well, I know the story, and I was a little surprised that Steve had never done a book before. So the winter went by, the meeting or the drinks, that was in September, and the winter kind of went by, and the spring came, and Tim Neverett, we spoke in March, and he said, did you ever contact Steve? And I'm like, no, do you think he's still interested? And he says, yeah. I brought up the idea, and you never know. So I went down to spring training, and I talked with Steve. And at first, I didn't get the sense that he really wanted to do it. But after thinking about it for about a month or so, the phone rang here back in New York, and Steve said, well, I'm still not sure if I want to do it, but why don't you come out to Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about some more, and I'll introduce you to my inner circle. And so we spent a weekend talking about it. There was a Pirates dinner, which involved a lot of the 1971 Pirates, and I got to meet a lot of those guys, and by the end of the weekend, he was introducing me as his biographer. So that's really the story in a nutshell on how Steve wanted to go through with it. And it's not an easy thing for Steve, because a lot of what happened in the early 70s, it was very hard for him with the Steve Blass disease, and a lot of it he put out of his mind and back in his subconscious, and I don't think he was really too sure if he wanted to revisit that time in his life, but he came around, and at 69 years old, he thought, well, if I'm ever going to do it, I should do it now.
We're joined by author Erik Sherman. His latest book, Steve Blass, A Pirate for Life, will be available at Amazon.com, Pirate Clubhouse stores, and other outlets in your area. You'll be hearing an awful lot about that. I know that during the broadcast the last couple of days, Tim Neverett has been talking about it, and also Steve has been talking about the book, and we have so many Pirate fans around here, and those people who have met Steve, he is certainly bigger than life. Let's first of all, explain to me, though, how is this book any different than other baseball books? I mean, some of the baseball books and sports books that I've read in the past, they're snoozers. I mean, after a couple pages, you realize they're really they're below the Mendoza line. How is this book different?
Well, this is really 5 or 6 books in one, because it addresses issues that are so different from one another. Just in the context of the book, you have. You have the hook, which of course is the first chapter, which is entitled "They Named a Disease After Me," and never before has Steve opened up about his inexplicable inability to throw strikes after being a control pitcher for 9 seasons. So he opens up about that like never before. And I mean, you get into really the guts of what happened, not just with him, but with his family, the effect it had on the Pirates. So it's a very, very in-depth chapter about what was going through Steve's head and how it affected his life and the lives of so many others. And it's a story of love, too, in that chapter, how his teammates and coaches did everything that they could to try to help Steve because he was so beloved in that clubhouse. And then, other parts of the book, never before has a ball player painted a more accurate and in-depth picture of the inside of the clubhouse. And I mean, this was a Pirates clubhouse in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, this was one of the best teams in baseball. But I guarantee you, after working with Steve on this, that team had by far the most fun in any major league clubhouse, maybe in history. And Steve tells a lot of those stories, and there's a chapter on Clemente and his relationship with Clemente. And Clemente is this iconic